Welcome to video lesson number 20, and today we are starting our algebra unit, which is probably the most important unit for your math moving forward, and this is just on your algebra vocabulary. For this lesson, of course, you will need your TOC number 20 you were given in class, a pencil or pen to take notes. It was probably a wise idea to have a highlighter, marker, or colored pencil to highlight some key words. And calculators are permitted for this unit, and they are encouraged. If you do not have a calculator at home, you can download the Desmos app, or you can use the Desmos site on the computer. At the very top of TOC 20, let's dive into some vocabulary words. So you will see some vocabulary on the left of that table. It is variable, term, coefficient, and constant. The first word, variable, refers to a letter that is used to represent one or more numbers in an expression, equation, or inequality. So basically, a variable is the letter that we put into the math sentence that stands in for a number that we don't know. So here's an example for x, and that x is in place of a number that we're trying to figure out. So in this case, we can't figure it out because we don't know what it equals. So this is just an expression. But moving forward, when you get an equal sign, you can solve to figure out what that x is, and that's the goal of algebra. Here's another example. T minus 7 equals 21. And that t is red because it's the variable. The second term is term. It is a real number, a variable, or a combination of real numbers and variables that are separated by operations. So basically what this means, it is the pieces of your equation or your expression. So if we look at this example here, we have 14m plus 3 equals 2. That's an equation. The 14m, that is a piece because it's separated from the 3 by a plus sign. So the 14m is a term. The 3 is a term because it's separated from the 2 by the equal sign. So the plus sign and the equal sign are both operations, and all of those little pieces that are circled are terms. So in this case, it would have 3 terms. And you need to know how to separate those, and you need to know how to count how many terms there are in an expression or an equation. The third term that's here is coefficient. This is probably the hardest one to spell and the hardest one to say, but it is one of the most important ones that you need to know, and it is one that we refer to often, but students always forget. Again, it's coefficient, and it is the number that is multiplied by the variable, and we recognize it because it's the one that's always next to or partnered with the letter. So here's some examples. We have 8c. The 8, that's the number that's next to c. The 8 is the coefficient. It means 8 times whatever that value of c is. So we're multiplying 8 times c. When we figure out what c is, then we can multiply 8 times that number. So again, the coefficient is just that number being multiplied by the variable. In the second example, we have 9 times x. 9 is the coefficient. The last one is constant, and this is a term that does not contain a variable. It is the one that is just a number, and I say that it is constantly alone because it's just the number. It doesn't change. It is a constant. It's not variable. The variable is called a variable because the value can change depending on what it equals. The constant, a 1 is always 1, a 2 is always 2. So a constant just means that the number is itself, it doesn't change. So here's an example. In this equation, 5x plus 11 equals 9, the 11 is a constant and the 9 is a constant because they're just the numbers by themselves. They're constantly alone and they are constants. Take a second, make sure you have all this written down. Some extra things that I want you to do. I want you to put a star next to coefficient because that's one that you have to know. And I want you to write these words down to help you remember. The variable is the letter. The term is the chunk or pieces of the equation or expression. The coefficient is the coworker with the variable. And the constant is constantly alone. So write those down in addition to putting a star next to coefficient. Pause the video if you need more time. Something else you're going to have to do is you might be given an equation or an expression and have to identify the parts. So here's some practice. If we look at this example, the 11 is a number that is with a letter, so it is the coefficient. So go ahead and either highlight it a color or just circle it and draw an arrow like I did and write in the coefficient. Make sure you spell it properly. The letter in an expression or equation is always called the variable because its value can vary depending on what the equation equals. The 6 and the 27 are just numbers that are all by themselves, so they are constants that are constantly alone. The plus sign and the equal sign are operators or operation signs. And the last piece that you need to know is how many terms there are. And there are, term 1 is the coefficient with the variable, the constant 6, and the constant 27. Those make up 3 separate terms. So pause the video if you need to write these down and make sure you have them in your notes. The last little bit we have to cover is knowing the difference between an equation versus an expression. And we can determine the difference by a few key parts. So we have to know the difference between an equation or an expression. An expression is a term or combination of terms and operators. And the big thing with an expression, and this is an example, is 33n minus 10. It has a combination of a coefficient and variable, an operator, and then a constant, or it could just be 6h, which is one term with a coefficient and variable. It could just be 10 by itself. That's just an expression. All of the order of operations problems that we solve are expressions. There's no equal sign. So with that, that's the key difference, is an expression has no equal sign. I want you to write that down and highlight it. Make sure you star that. An expression has no equal sign. Let me say that again. An expression has no equal sign. So if the expression has no equal sign, the equation is a mathematical sentence stating that two expressions are equal, so it has to have an equal sign. So look at this example. I took the expression 3n minus 10, put an equal sign, and said what it was equal to. An equation allows us to solve for the value of the variable. So it gives us that equal sign with what it is equal to. Here's another example. 4x plus 2 equals 10. I want you to draw a huge equal sign next to the word equation. Draw a huge equal sign next to the word equation so you remember that an equation has an equal sign. And I want you to write that down underneath. An equation has an equal sign, an expression does not. So if you look at the word equal and the word equation, you can see they start out the exact same. So that's another way to remember it. So if you have an equal sign next to the word equation, that'll help you remember that. That's it. It's time for you to show what you've learned. Let's log in and do your homework quiz.